Factors are important too. So once a trauma has ended and the person has gone through all these, given their pre-traumatic experience of gender, age, genetic makeup, now they end up with the aftermath of the trauma. So what comes right after the trauma, and even a few weeks or months after the trauma, can be important too. Some things to think about are, again, the support system of the person. Are they being supported by people they know? Are they receiving enough resources, if you will, to deal with their traumatic experience? And also, do they go through treatment or no? Do they receive treatment? Do they seek treatment? And specifically, are they able to actually benefit from the treatment? Those are post-traumatic elements that can affect the trauma. And now, there are some questions that may come up that I have listed at least. And generally, this is what people ask themselves about trauma. Number one is, what constitutes resilience and how can it be increased? And that is, again, about those 92% that do experience trauma but don't develop PTSD. So how come they're resilient? And what constitutes it? And how can that be increased? Well, in order to understand that, we have to go back to those, pre-traumatic, peri-traumatic, and post-traumatic factors. And part of it, if I have been mentioned already, is some kind of a hormonal makeup of the person that can affect traumatic experience. For instance, we know that just generally women, interestingly, have certain enzymes. This research has shown that they have a certain enzyme that men don't really have, and that helps women in a certain way and fashion that doesn't help men. And what it does, basically, the enzyme in general makes women more kind of sensitive, if you will, to traumatic experiences. And that's why we see that actually more women, if you will, develop a response to trauma, but also the same enzyme is linked to the idea that also more women resolve this traumatic experience by themselves without even going through any type of treatment. That's an interesting thing that has been observed. And compared to that, we see men who generally don't have this enzyme, they may be less sensitive to traumatic situations and develop less of a traumatic response, but also they are less able to get over PTSD symptoms by themselves. Meaning, if both of these groups, are not, if we consider two groups of men and women who experience traumatic experiences or events, and then they don't go through therapy at all, generally more women are prone to develop some traumatic sensitivity and experience, and they report more of a subjective traumatization, but also they resolve it by themselves. And then the other group, they may report less of a traumatization through these events. But if they are developing PTSD, which is basically goes back to that 8%, then they have a harder time to actually resolve it by themselves, whereas the women may not. They may resolve the post-traumatic experience just by themselves.